The Council's verdict. The Galactic Council hall shimmered under the weight of old laws and ancient rivalries. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the towering chamber, but all attention was fixed on one bitter motion: whether to approve a declaration of war against Earth. At the center, the Tarshic delegation, sharp and coiled with confidence, stood firm. They called the humans dangerous, unpredictable, a risk no one should take. The humans had come far in only a decade, from isolation to interstellar presence. No one expected it. Their homeworld was a death world, violent and harsh, and somehow, it had forged minds brilliant enough to leap across the stars. But now the Tarshic wanted war. They claimed it was legal preemptive defense. The humans had a past, yes, records of covert operations, proxy wars, unstable alliances, history, full of fire and scars. But that was Earth's past. Since first contact, they had done nothing wrong. Still, the Council nodded. Slowly, silently, the votes turned against Earth. Among the crowd, Ambassador Ryan from the human delegation sat frozen. Her hands trembled under the table. She wasn't a soldier, but she felt like one, now fighting with only words. The decision was legal. The Tarshic outnumbered humans by trillions, had thousands of years of interstellar experience, and yet, they feared Earth. As the vote passed, the chamber shifted. No cheers, just cold acceptance. And then, an interruption. The representative from the Velari Confederation stood. They had remained neutral for centuries. Their empire, once vast, now diminished. Their voice was still respected. The chamber hushed. Ryan looked up. "We move to propose a separate motion," the Velari speaker said, calm and deliberate. "One concerning reparations owed to the humans." "From us." Whispers exploded. The Tarshic glared, their plans unraveling before their eyes. "We confess to ancient crimes," the Velari speaker continued. "Abductions, experimentation, violations of sentient rights. The humans are among the wronged. We seek restitution." It was under Council law, reparations required tangible offerings, sometimes even military-grade aid if the victims accepted. The Tarshic protested immediately, shouting that it was a trick, a weaponization of bureaucracy, but the speaker silenced them. Rules were rules. The Velari laid it bare: records, admissions, and an offer half their remaining fleet, and one fully operational military-grade shipyard. To Earth. The Tarshic erupted in fury. "You're giving them weapons." The Velari smiled calmly. "We're giving them justice." But there was a loophole. Earth couldn't accept foreign military tech unless they already had similar tech themselves. The Tarshic counted on that clause. And then the Velari pulled out one final record. A ship had crashed on Earth decades ago, recovered, hidden, covered up, but the humans had it. Legally, that meant they already possessed the tech. Ambassador Ryan stood. Her voice wavered but did not break. "If what you say is true," she said to the Velari, "then we accept." The chamber froze. The Tarshic stood in shock as their own weapon law was turned against them. Their war was still coming, yes, but now Earth would be armed, prepared. The chamber had voted for war. Now Earth would vote to survive. Echoes of the past. Ambassador Ryan left the council hall with her pulse pounding in her ears. The roar of alien voices still echoed behind her, but she didn't look back. Her mind was already racing ahead toward Earth, toward her people, and toward the future that had just tilted violently on its axis. They were going to war, but now, they had a fighting chance. The Velari delegation followed her silently through the stone corridors of the ancient council tower. These halls had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. Now they bore witness to something rare, an act of redemption. At least, that's what the Velari claimed it to be. In the private diplomatic chamber, Ryan stared at the Velari ambassador. The being's gray, elongated features betrayed no emotion. Its large, reflective eyes blinked slowly as it unrolled a data scroll onto the table. "This is what we recovered from the crash site on your world," the Velari said. "The vessel was never declared lost to the Council, because we never expected anyone to survive. One of our own was aboard, a scientist, ambitious, cruel." Ryan's breath caught. "The conspiracy theories, Roswell, Area 51, the vanished desert programs were real." "I read the files," she whispered. "I thought they were myths. They were buried to avoid punishment," the Velari said. "We believed the crash vaporized everything. We were wrong. Your people salvaged more than wreckage. They salvaged understanding." Ryan stared down at the blueprints. "Fragmented, yes, but clearly alien. Warp engine coils, zero-point stabilization systems, material unknown to human science." If Earth's engineers could even grasp a tenth of it. We never used this, she said. We thought it was a weather balloon, then a spy plane. We locked it in underground vaults and forgot it. The Velari nodded. You forgot, but you still possess, and that changes everything. Outside the council chambers, the Tarshik were already rallying allies. Their broadcasts blamed Earth for stirring chaos, for manipulating the Velari, for exploiting tragedy. But among the smaller civilizations, especially those who had suffered under Tarshik arrogance, something shifted. Sympathy, respect, a sliver of hope for the humans. On Earth, the response was electric. Military leaders gathered in secret command rooms. Scientists pulled old classified documents from cold storage. Civilian leaders scrambled to inform the public without sparking mass panic. But across the globe, something else happened to something the Tarshik didn't anticipate. People volunteered, not out of fear, out of fury, out of pride. Mechanics, hackers, miners, farmers, students, millions offered whatever they had, skills, minds and bodies, to prepare for what was coming. This wasn't just war. This was survival. And humans had always been at their best when survival meant adaptation. In a mountain facility beneath Iceland, a team of engineers opened a vault sealed for over 50 years. The Velari wreckage sat beneath layers of concrete and paranoia. Now, it was awake again, scanned, decoded, and rebuilt piece by piece. General Alec Navarro, Supreme Commander of Earth's Joint Defense Alliance, stood at the observation deck. He was old, scarred, and calm. I don't trust them, he said, watching the Velari ships being loaded into Earth's orbit via hyperspace anchors. But I trust this moment. Beside him, Dr. Sarah Cohen, the astrophysicist who had cracked the first layer of Velari code, whispered, "Do you think we'll survive?" Alec glanced down at the workers, humans of every nation, race, and background, fusing alien alloys with Earth metals, building things no one truly understood. He replied, "I don't think they know what we're capable of." And across the stars, aboard a black Tarshik dreadnought, Admiral Vaughn clicked his mandibles in frustration. The plan had been perfect. Strike fast, strike first, end the humans before they could become a threat. But the Velari's interference had undone decades of planning. Dispatched the first wave, he commanded, strike them before they complete the integration. But Admiral, one of his lieutenants, said cautiously, the humans may already have the weapons installed. Vaughn's eyes glowed with disdain. Then we'll see if legends match reality. Let them use their Deathworld courage. It won't save them. Back on Earth, the first warnings came through distant relays. Massive ships were entering. Hume claimed. Space. War was no longer a declaration. It was real, and humanity had less than 4 weeks to prepare for the storm. When the sky turned red, the first sign of war came not from orbit but from the silence. Satellites went dark. Communications relays blinked off one by one, like stars being swallowed. Earth's orbital surveillance grid, once a net of security, now hung fractured and blind. Across command centers on every continent, alarms screamed in languages that didn't need translating. Humanity was no longer watching the skies. The skies were watching them. General Alec Navarro stood in Earth Command's war room, surrounded by three-dimensional projections of a vast armada descending toward Seoul. Tarshik warships, brutal in design. Rows of jagged hulls bristling with plasma cannons and siege claws. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Their lead ship alone was the size of Manhattan. Beside him, Admiral Rain Okoro, commander of Earth's newly unified orbital defense, whispered the words everyone else was thinking, "We're outmatched." Navarro didn't respond. His eyes locked on the data feed from the Icelandic integration facility. It wasn't done. The first human Velari hybrid vessels, called V-Class Raptors, weren't flight tested yet. Their engineers had warned, if deployed now, they could fail. If deployed later, Earth might not be around to try. Across the world, cities pulsed with controlled panic. Governments activated underground shelters. Families gathered around emergency broadcasts. And still millions of civilians worked tirelessly, welding armor, splicing code, rushing food into cargo holds bound for distant defense stations. Bay had no illusions. Humanity's technology was young. Their numbers were few, but no one retreated. In orbit, the first clash came swiftly. The Tarshik arrived like a tidal wave to full fleets breaching into the Sol system without warning. Ignoring every council protocol, they began with Mars. Human settlements were shattered. In hours, glass domes and mining colonies turned to ash. But before the Tarshik could push inward, something new happened. A fleet of 10 hybrid Raptors launched from Earth's exosphere, unannounced, unproven, and unafraid. Each vessel was smaller, then a Tarshik cruiser, but moved like nothing seen before. Their thrusters pulsed with soft, violet light. The Velari warp cores finally brought online. Their AI co-pilots were still learning, but the human pilots, they fought like no one else. Captain Ilara Voss, first commander of the V-class lead, the charge, a decorated fighter ace from Europa base. She had once said she'd never fight another war, but now, she was humanity's spearhead. As she guided her ship toward the enemy formation, she sent a simple message: "We are the children of a broken world, but we do not kneel." The Raptors dove into battle. It wasn't clean, it wasn't beautiful, it was chaos. Plasma bursts lit the black sky, gravity mines shattered holes, energy shields flared and died, but the Raptors held. They wove through enemy formations like insects made of fire and rage, striking from angles the Tarshik couldn't anticipate. On the ground, people watched the live feeds cheering, crying, praying, and somewhere in the quiet dark, Ambassador Ryan watched too, her hand over her heart. Earth wasn't just resisting, Earth was fighting back, but the cost was heavy. 3 Raptors were lost in the first hour. One ship took a direct hit while shielding a retreating medical cruiser full of Martian avatars. The pilota, 19-year-old cadet named John Dow, never ejected. His last words: "Tell Earth I did my best." The Council watched in stunned silence as live feeds from neutral drones captured the battle. The Tarshik had started this war under the belief that Earth would break, but now, their finest fleet had lost 14 cruisers to barely a dozen human ships. Velari diplomats filed a formal request to pause the war for reassessment. The Tarshik laughed it off, but others began to waver. The Jatari, a minor race often bullied by the Tarshik, issued a statement of support for Earth. Then the Kiros, then the Marakai, the spark had caught. Humanity's resistance had become more than self-defense. It had become inspiration back in the war room. Navarro and Okoro met with the Velari engineers. The next phase was risky full planetary integration. They would convert Earth's orbital platforms into advanced defense stations using Velari antimatter conversion tech. It would make Earth harder to take, but one miscalculation and the whole planet could become a fireball. Navarro nodded grimly. "Do it." And on a quiet mountainside in Japan, an old woman opened a faded chest. Inside was a weathered journal written by her grandfather, a man who once saw strange lights crash into a desert sky. She placed it gently in Okoria's hands. "Get this to the integration team," she said softly. "There are things in here that may help." In that moment, all across the world, people understood something deeper. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for identity, for memory, for the right to rise from their past and face the stars. The sky had turned red, but Earth still stood. The memory in the metal beneath Earth's crust, inside an unmarked military facility deep within the Himalayas. The integration core hummed to life. This was where it would happen. The final convergence of Velari technology and human ingenuity. And they were running out of time. Engineer Thalia Moreau stood beside a towering core of alien alloy, her face bathed in soft violet light. Around her, thousands of components levitated mid-air, guided by neural scaffolding, not human hands. She had trained all her life to design machines. Now she was building a miracle forged from memory, because the old woman's journal, delivered only days ago, wasn't just a personal relic, it was a map. Her grandfather had been part of the secret Cold War team that first opened the Velari wreckage in the Nevada desert. Though silenced and ridiculed, he had sketched what he saw, copied equations he didn't understand, and most importantly, recorded everything the Velari prisoner had said. That prisoner had described a taste of hidden tech too dangerous for its time, locked behind layers of living code. Now Thalia had the key. It was never just a crash, she whispered to herself. It was a message. Above ground, preparations accelerated. Orbital defense stations were linked in a global web. Satellites were reprogrammed to detect Velari-based energy signals. Entire cities were retrofitted with shield grids. But still no one knew if it would be enough, because far beyond Pluto's orbit, the Tarshik's second armada had entered the system. This fleet was different. No scouts, no warnings, just war. Admiral Vaughn now led them personally. His pride wounded, his fear masked by vengeance. The humans had embarrassed the Tarshik on a galactic stage. Now, he would burn their planet to dust and scatter their bones as a warning. The Council watched helplessly. They had declared the war legal, but none had anticipated this scale. Protests rose, petitions demanded retraction. The Council speaker called for reconsideration. The Tarshik ignored them. To the Council's credit, not all stood silent. The Velari dispatched to support cruisers to Earth's outer orbit. The Kiros offered medical aid, and the Jatari, once insignificant, sent 12,000 volunteer soldiers in cryosleep pods. Humanity's story was no longer theirs alone, but still, it was humanity that had to write the next chapter at the edge of Earth's upper orbit. Captain Alara Voss reviewed the tactical data. She was bruised, sleep-deprived, and carrying the burden of 3 lost pilots. But she was also determined that the Raptors were stronger now. Each had undergone retrofits using the newly decoded failsafe, a technology once dormant, now alive in their hands. The War Council had named the program Echo Protocol because it echoed across time, across pain, across sacrifice. As the fleet organized into formation, Talia's voice came through the command channel. She was aboard the primary integration relay, overseeing what she called the heart. Echo Protocol is online, she said, her voice steady, and I'm transmitting now. If this works, every Raptor in your fleet will have tenfold the shielding, and something else, ... A variable core shift, meaning, Alara asked, meaning, if they try to hit you, your ship will shift between microdom. For half a second, you'll be untouchable. There was silence, then a single, breathless reply. God, no, Dahlia said. Just Earth. Illyra's fleet rose into the stars like phantoms. Their hulls glowed with deep violet fire, and within their engines pulsed the memories of 2 civilizations, one broken, one still burning. Then came the darkness. Tarshik ships began to breach Earth's outer defenses. The sky turned to flame. Several human orbital platforms were vaporized instantly. Cries echoed through the command channels. But the Raptors didn't stop. They flew into the storm. Vaughn's flagship targeted Ilara's squadron. The Tarshik admiral sneered, watching as his gunners locked in fire. The beams sliced through space and then vanished. Ilara's ship flickered, shimmered, and wasn't there. It had shifted. It reappeared behind Vaughn's flank and unleashed hell. Missiles and gravity twisters ruptured his secondary hangars. Tarshik drones spilled into the void like insects, and the Raptors danced through them with blades of light and lightning. For the first time in centuries, the Tarshik had no answer. On Earth, billions watched live transmissions. They saw their pilots survive the impossible. They saw alien ships fall. They saw courage in action. No longer legends, no longer Death Worlders, just people. Fighting for their right to exist. At the integration core, Thalia slumped to the ground. Blood trickled from her nose. The Echo Protocol had nearly burned her brain from the inside, but it worked. And as engineers lifted her up, she smiled through the haze. They'll live, she whispered. They have to. In the council chamber, murmurs turned into debate, then outrage, then shame. This war had been allowed, but this war had gone too far. Ambassadors from a dozen minor races demanded it be stopped. The speaker issued a motion for immediate ceasefire arbitration, but Vaughn had other plans. He was readying a planetary strike, a bomb unlike any seen before, meant to ignite Earth's core itself, and he would use it, in one day. Humanity had 24 hours to stop the end of their world. 24 hours to midnight. The war clock began ticking the moment Vaughn's doomsday weapon came online. From the icy shadows of his dreadnought's belly, a massive construct unfurled, gleaming and silent. It was not a missile, it was a seed, a planetary core destabilizer engineered to burrow into a planet's crust and ignite its mantle. Not instant death, but extinction spread across days, a slow, merciless end. Its name was the Harrow. When Earth Command intercepted the encrypted signal confirming deployment, a grim silence fell across every operations room. Screens dimmed, radios quieted. It was the kind of silence that wrapped around the soul and whispered, "There may not be a tomorrow." General Alec Navarro stood beneath the holographic projection of the Harrow's countdown. 24 hours. That was all. Not enough time to destroy it conventionally. Not enough time to warn every nation. And not enough time to panic, just enough time to act. "We'll intercept it in space," he said, voice like gravel. "But we'll need more than Raptors. We need someone on the inside." In the shadows of the command chamber, a hand rose. It was Agent Nadia Armin, Earth's most elusive intelligence operative, former infiltrator, war ghost, and one of the few humans who had ever been inside a Tarshik vessel and lived to tell of it. "You'll never crack it from the outside," she said. "That device is keyed to Tarshik neural signatures. Biolocked. I'll go in. But I need a ship with stealth, not firepower. You'll never make it past their security field," Alec warned. "I'll find a way." Her ship launched 2 hours later, black dart stitched from human and Velari tech, running cold and silent. Its name was Whisper. No weapons, no lights, just speed, shadows, and courage. As Nadia sailed into the black, Earth prepared for the other part of the plan, distraction. The remaining Raptors, along with every space-worthy vessel, Earth still had retrofitted cargo freighters, asteroid miners with magnetic cannons, even orbital maintenance pods rallied for a single push against the Harrow's escort fleet. They called it Operation SUNDIVER, that it was not a suicide mission, but many knew they wouldn't return in the skies above. Captain Elara Voss reviewed her squad's formation. 5 Raptors remained, each one patched, scorched, and trembling on the edge of function. But each pilot had volunteered, not out of obligation, out of resolve. The battle began in silence, no speeches, no trumpets, just ships launching into the void, faces lit only by red emergency lights. They met the enemy at the edge of Earth's gravity well. The Tashik fleet had tightened its formation around the Harrow, like armor around a heart. But the Raptors dove in, wings cutting the vacuum. Like razors. The first strike shattered to Tashik destroyers. The second cost a human pilot, Lieutenant Kero, who used his damaged Raptor to ram a cruiser before his core imploded. Across the sky, humanity fought like stars falling in reverse, flaring bright as they rose to meet oblivion. Meanwhile, aboard, the Whisper Nadia Armand slid through the black like a shadow. Her vessel drifted through the security veil unnoticed, mimicking Tashik thermal patterns. She guided it until she was only 20 kilometers from the Harrow, then she ejected her EVA suit. Designed for deep infiltration, began its silent drift toward the launch bay. Inside her helmet, her oxygen was measured by heartbeats, no alarms, no backup. She breached the hull and slipped into a maintenance shaft. The Tashik never expected borders. Why would they? The humans were supposed to be prey. She crawled, crept, and climbed, bypassing sensor nodes and heat traps. Her implants synced with Velari decrypting bulkheads faster than the ship could notice, and then she was there. The Harrow's core, a spherical chamber, pulsed before her, lined with tendrils of violet crystal and humming veins of energy. It was alive, a machine designed to taste the heart of a world and poison it from within. She accessed the terminal, screamed in alien code, biolocks, genetic scans, neural pattern encryption, but her left arm had been modified for this moment, with Velari nanostructures and a synthetic cortex grown in stealth labs. She pressed her palm to the interface. The Harrow blinked, recognized her, paused, override sequence authorized. The machine whispered in her mind, but she felt it, her neurons flaring, blood vessels constricting. The override was invasive. It was rewriting her thoughts, her memories, everything. She gritted her teeth. I'm not dying for Earth, she whispered. I'm surviving for it. And with a single breath, she triggered the core collapse, not the Harrow's detonation, but its unraveling. It began to collapse inward, eating itself. Back in orbit, Admiral Vaughn's screens went white. His target vanished. He screamed. He launched everything he had, but it was too late. The Harrow was gone. Earth still lived. From her seat inside the dying Harrow, Nadia sent one final message. Mission complete. Tell them I chose this. Tell them, we don't run. Then the line went dead. The Harrow imploded in a storm of violet light, and Earth's skies were still blue. The debt of blood and starlight, the Harrow was gone, vaporized before it could taste Earth's core. But the cost weighed heavy in every breath that followed. On the ground, people emerged from bunkers to a dawn that felt more sacred than sunlight. Across continents, skies once feared to burn now shimmered with broken stars and the slow trails of returning Raptors. Humanity had survived its first true extermination, attempt by a galactic superpower, but the war was not over. The Tashik still had a fleet, still had weapons, still had pride. Admiral Vaughn, burning with fury and humiliation, refused to retreat. His dreadnought remained in high orbit, rallying what was left of his broken armada. To him, this was no longer about strategy or dominance. This was vengeance. In the halls of the Galactic Council, the tides had turned. The Velari, Kiros, and Jitari had all submitted formal censure against the Tashik. Even once loyal allies now hesitated. No species wanted to be seen on the wrong side of genocide. The Speaker, under enormous pressure, convened an emergency session, and Earth, once ignored, underestimated, nearly erased, was now the center of the galaxy's attention. Ambassador Ryan stood again before the chamber. But this time, she wasn't pleading for peace. She was standing as the representative of a people who had fought, died, and endured without surrender. This war was made legal by this council, she began, her voice steady, but not right. And now we ask you not for sympathy. We ask you for justice. She revealed data packets, recordings from Harrow, encrypted orders signed by Vaughn, intercepted transmissions celebrating Earth's destruction as a foregone conclusion. The chamber darkened as the evidence played. Gasps, silence, disgust, and finally emotion. For the first time in Council history, a member species was to be sanctioned and expelled during wartime. The Tarshik were being stripped of their voting rights, their trade lines frozen, their colonies declared open to re-evaluation and relief aid. They had lost more than a battle. They had lost the moral gravity of the stars. But none of it mattered to Admiral Vaughn. He launched one final assault, an all-or-nothing strike at Earth's last orbital line. He called it the Purge Flamer formation of 5 carriers, 2 dreadnoughts, and a payload of black starfire weapons illegal in every quadrant, outlawed even by Tarshik standards. His goal was simple. Even if he died, he would reduce Earth to ashdot at the integration core. Thalia Moreau stared at the incoming wave with tear-filled eyes. She was exhausted, her neural systems still recovering from the previous overdrive, but she wasn't done. "What else do we have?" she asked the engineers. They shook their heads. "We've launched every ship, every satellite, everything." But one technician hesitated. One last interface experimental. It was part of the Velari's AI transfer protocols, meant to link a human directly to a ship's control cortex. "It's not tested," another added. "It could kill you." Thalia closed her eyes, exhaled slowly, then smiled faintly. "It could save us too." She was wired in within the hour. The ship was called Ember Crown, a massive Vela Reva-class prototype too unstable to deploy. Until now, as the final wave of Tarshik ships approached, the Ember Crown activated. It didn't launch. It unfolded. Massive wings of plasma and mirrored. Light stretched into orbit like the arms of a dying god. Controlled not by joysticks or commands, but by thought, feeling, and memory. Thalia became the ship, saw through its eyes, felt through its walls. And for the first time, humanity was not fighting with borrowed power. They had become the power. The battle that followed was chaos wrapped in poetry. The Ember Crown danced through the void, absorbing starfire, bending time, breaking laws of motion. Each Tarshik missile was intercepted before it could breathe. Carriers crumbled under gravitational lances. The dreadnoughts turned, fled, and were caught in gravity snares and pulled into their own imploding cores. And at the center, Admiral Vaughn screamed as his final vessel ruptured under the weight of its own hatred. Earth had not just defended itself, it had defied annihilation. The Ember Crown descended into low orbit days later, its core flickering. Thalia was alive, barely, carried from the bridge in silence, her neural link scorched, and her eyes bloodshot from the overload. But she smiled. "We flew," she whispered. "We really flew." In a small garden outside Geneva, Ambassador Ryan stood by a monument of dark stone and silver thread. It bore the names of every pilot, engineer, medic, and volunteer who had died during the defense. Nadia Arman's name was carved at the center. Below it, for words, we chose to stand. Around the galaxy, something strange began to happen. Races that had never spoken began to share resources. Treaties were rewritten. Trade lines opened with Earth, and one by one, the whispers grew louder. Perhaps the humans weren't monsters. Perhaps they were hope. And the stars remember 3 months had passed since the last Tarshik dreadnought fell in Earth's orbit. The war was over, but the scars remained in orbit. Debris from 100 battles still glinted in sunlight-frozen wreckage of alien steel and shattered ambition. Engineers from dozens of species now worked side by side with humans to clear the remains. What had once been a war zone was slowly becoming something else, a cradle of peace, built from the wreckage of pride. In the new Galactic Accord chamber, no longer located on the distant Council world but temporarily relocated to Earth, species that had once viewed humanity as an oddity now stood as allies, some out of guilt, others out of admiration, but many out of respect. Earth had earned its place, not through diplomacy, not through threats, but by standing tall when it was most alone. Ambassador Ryan sat beneath the domed glass ceiling of the rebuilt chamber. She had aged years and months, her face lined with exhaustion and wonder. Today, she wasn't here to speak. She was here to listen. The Velari elder, robed in silver cloth and humility, rose to address the assembly. "There is something unique in the human spirit," he said, "something that frightened us, until we saw it for what it truly was. Not rage, not savagery, but the unyielding will to protect, even when all seems lost." He paused. "What do we do with such a force? We learn from it." A ripple moved through the chamber. The proposal had already been drafted. The formation of a new peacekeeping body, the Soul Accord. a coalition led by Earth, supported by Velari technology, Kiros diplomacy, Jatari logistics, and many others. It would not be a military empire, it would be a shield, a promise that never again would a world stand alone. And yet, not everyone celebrated. In the outer fringe, surviving remnants of the Tarshik brooded in hiding, their empire shattered, their pride devoured. They whispered of revenge, but even among them doubt had taken root. They had seen what humans were capable of, not in battle but in compassion. It was a story spreading far and wide, of a soldier who threw herself into a reactor to stop a doomsday weapon, of pilots who flew into fire not to destroy, but to shield the innocent, of a scientist who became one with a starship so her people might see another dawn. And of a people who, when faced with extinction, chose to rise instead of kneel. At the heart of Geneva, a monument was unveiled, a circle of hands, human and alien, sculpted in stone. Beneath it, a single phrase carved in 50 languages: "We remember what we chose to become." General Alec Navarro retired quietly. Captain Ilara Voss turned instructor, teaching a new generation of Raptor pilots not just how to fly but why. Moro never fully recovered from her neural link, but in her wheelchair beneath the growing Ember Crown Museum, she watched children ask questions about war, peace, and lightspeed dreams. And Ambassador Ryan, she never left the chamber again. Earth needed a voice in the stars. She had become that voice. One evening, long after the crowds had faded and the cameras had gone dark, she stood beneath a projection of the Milky Way and whispered to herself, "We were never alone. We just had to prove we belonged." High above, the stars shimmered back. Across alien worlds, stories were told around hearths, tables, and holograms. Not myths, not fables, but memories. Of the Death Worlders who didn't conquer, but protected. Of the race that learned from its darkest past and chose a brighter future. Of humans flawed, fierce, compassionate who turned their greatest weakness into their most powerful weapon, hope. And though the war was over, the stars would never forget.